Hello everyone, welcome back. My name is Adriana and today I'm going to share with you everything that I knit in 2023. Here is the stack of things that I'm able to share with you today. 2023 for me was the first year that I more seriously got into knitting. I think I actually started at the end of 2022. I started to get back into knitting. I learned when I was quite young, and then I didn't do it for a number of years, probably like 10 or 15 years, or like off and on here and there. And then I got more seriously into it at the end of 2022, for sure the majority of 2023. I took kind of a break in the summer to focus more on gardening, but for sure in the fall and winter months that just ended, I was doing a lot of knitting. So I'm excited to talk about kind of that first year of my knitting journey, and it'll be fun to see where I started and where I ended up and the memories I have with each project. I have some statistics to share with you about my knitting from 2023. I think statistics are fun to look at, and I discovered some things that kind of surprised me about my knitting this year while I was adding these up. First, I completed 17 projects in 2023. Out of those 17 projects, 1 or 6% of them was a sweater, 2 or 12% were shawls or scarves, 1 or 6% was a blanket, 1 or 6% was a toque or balaclava, kind of anything to go on your head like a hat, 1 or 6% was a pair of mittens, 1 or 6% was other accessories category, and 10 or 59% were pairs of socks. So I did a lot of sock knitting this year. That was something that I feel like I've grown a lot in because I've done 10 pairs. So I feel a lot more confident and comfortable with my sock making abilities at the end of 2023 than I did at the beginning. And we'll talk about that once I start talking about the projects. I was also interested to see how many things I made from a pattern versus things that I made up or self-drafted. And it turns out that 11 out of the 17 projects, or 65%, were from a pattern, and 6 or 35% were self-drafted that I made up, which I thought was kind of interesting. From the patterns I followed, I paid for 6 of them, or 6 of them were paid for, which is 35% of the total amount of projects that I did, and 55% of the from patterned projects that I did. And then 5 of the patterns that I followed were free patterns, which is 29% of the total projects that I did, and 45% of the projects that I followed patterns for. I thought it was kind of interesting that I worked from 8 different designers, and the ones that I repeated were 3 from Tin Can Knits, which were one of their sock patterns and one of their mitten patterns, and 2 were from Petite Knit. Those were the only designers that I repeated this year. I thought it'd be interesting to look at who the recipients of my finished projects were, and this year 10 or 59% of my projects were gifts, and 7 or 41% of my projects were for me. I definitely thought it would be more for me and less gifts, just from my memory. So that was really interesting to actually look at the numbers, or look at my projects page on Ravelry and be like, oh yeah, that was a gift, that was a gift, that was a gift. And yeah, I just didn't realize I gifted so many projects this year, which is cool. I ended up using 12 different yarns, and for this I did just types, not colors. So if I used the same yarn in multiple projects but in different colors, I just counted it as one yarn. So 12 different yarns from 7 different brands, and the brands that I used the most often or repeated using were Old School Acres, which I used in 7 projects, and Briggs & Little, which I used in 4 projects. And then finally, I have the colors. What are the colors that I worked most with this year? The top color I worked with was brown, and that I think came from all the Christmas socks I did for my family. I did 4 projects in brown to match. So 35% of my projects were brown, or 6 projects. 4 projects were gray, which is 24%. 3 or 18% of the projects were blue, which I thought was so interesting because I don't like the color blue for me. Clearly, I like it for other people because I ended up giving all those projects away. 2 or 12% I made in the color red. And then 1 or 6% I made in pink. And then the last one, 1 or 6% were green, which I thought green was one of the colors that I knit the most with this year. So that was shocking to me that I did more projects with blue than I did with green, which in my mind, I felt like I was always knitting with green, which I guess technically is true because I have my green blanket that I worked on the entire year and I'm still working on, so that's not included in this. So I have been working with green very consistently throughout the year, but I definitely thought I had more green projects done. So those are all the statistics. I really enjoy looking at statistics and seeing what my knitting actually was like, not just from my memory, but with the numbers, I did not calculate how many yards or meters I knit throughout the year, and I didn't calculate the cost of all the projects. I didn't keep track of that, and I don't know if I will this year either. We'll see. So let's start with the projects. I'm going to go in chronological order of when I finished them, and obviously I won't be able to show you all of them because I did gift a lot. Any that I gifted to my family members I have here, but everything else I'll just show pictures. Also, I did not de-pill or prepare any of these. So these are just real life knits, what they look like when they're being used, which I think is fine. The first thing I finished in 2023 was this pair of fine socks. The pattern is a Briggs & Little pattern, and I knit this in Briggs & Little Sport yarn in the color 88 Oatmeal. And this was the first sock pattern I ever did. I knit it on DPNs, which was my first time using DPNs, and I really enjoyed knitting it. The pattern though had a 3-point decrease. I don't know if that's always how it is knitting socks on DPNs, but they decreased at 3 points to go to the toes. And I had some laddering issues where you could clearly see the stitch that went between the DPNs. And that stopped me from wearing these because my toes stretched it out a bit and made the ladders even more noticeable. And I didn't like that you could see my toe through it. So I didn't wear these at first a lot. Then after a few more socks that I knit, I became more comfortable and more confident with my sock making abilities. And I ended up ripping the toes out of these because I figured I'm not wearing them anyway if I mess it up. It's not like I ruined something like my favorite socks. So I ended up ripping the toes back and then doing just a wedge shaped toe that I started knitting after. So now it's a wedge shaped toe. And the process was actually really easy. It wasn't too difficult. And it gave me a lot of confidence. And now these are my favorite pair of socks. I found this yarn. I was skeptical while I was knitting it. I thought it would be really scratchy and kind of irritating on my feet. But each time I wear them and each time I wash them, they get softer. And because these do have some nylon in them, I just throw them in with my clothes in the washing machine and I make sure to wash it on cold. And I have not had any felting problems. So yeah, they're my first pair of socks and I think they're my favorite pair of socks. The next project I finished was a Sophie shawl. and I made this in, I held 2 yarns together. I did the Briggs, okay. I had some mystery yarn from my grandmother that didn't have tags on it. I'm thinking it was the Briggs & Little Durasport 1-ply yarn, so the same yarn that I used to make the socks. I'm thinking that's what it was, but I don't have the tags for it, so I really don't know. I had that with, in the color Forest. And then I also had the Patons North America Classic Wool DK Superwash in the color 12-23-7 Sea Green Heather. And this is how it turned out. I really do like the way the yarns look together in this. This was quite a big project for me, just getting back into knitting. And it took me a while. Let's see, when did I start and stop it? Oh, I guess it took me just under a month. I started it February 7, completed it March 3rd. I remember with this project, I did not do the increase rate correct on the first half. And my plan was just to increase until I got to half the amount of yarn that I had and then start decreases. So I got to half the weight of yarn that I had, started decreases, and I guess I did the decrease rate correct because I ran out of yarn and I still had probably like this much to go. So I had to rip back to I think I just ripped back to halfway and then like decreased at a faster rate. And that worked out, but that was a lot of work that I had to rip out and redo. And that was a little bit, I guess, one of my first like defeating moments in knitting last year was coming to the realization that I wasn't going to be able to finish with the yarn I had, and I had to rip out all my work. I'm glad I did because I like that it's even now on both sides, and I'm really happy with how it turned out. It is kind of heavy, like the fabric that the 2 yarns made was kind of heavy, so I don't wear this too much, but now that I have it out again, I think I'm going to leave it out so it prompts me to wear it more often. The next thing I made were a pair of Rye Light socks by Tin Can Knits, and I knit this in Cascade Yarns Heritage Sock in the color 5686 China Blue. And I made this pair of socks for my mom for her birthday. At the time, I had the ChiaoGoo interchangeable needle set, I think the 5-inch ones, but the smallest needle size was, I think, a 2.75 millimeter in that set. And a lot of the sock patterns I was seeing were for smaller needle sizes. And this was one of the only free sock patterns that called for a 2.75 millimeter needle. So that's how I came to choose this pattern to make for my mom. I decided I wanted to do socks for some people's birthdays this year. And then after I made this pair, I decided, yes, I like sock knitting. And then I think my birthday was not too long after that. And I got the smaller needle size of the ChiaoGoo interchangeable needles. Because I was like, yes, I'm a sock knitter, which clearly I was this year. Yeah, I was happy with these socks. I think they ended up being a little bit big because it was a superwash yarn and because the pattern there's like a garter panel in the front, which is a little bit stretchy, but everything else is stockinette, so it doesn't have as much, it doesn't want to hold itself up like a ribbed sock would. So I think they're a little big and they were superwash, so they grew a bit more than I thought. But yeah, now I know for next time. I ended up using the leftovers I had of that Cascade Yarns Heritage Sock 5686 China Blue to make a pair of the Rye Light socks for my son. So I did the toddler pattern right after I did the adult size. Oh, and I do have them here. this is what they look like. And yes, they do need to be depilled. And because they're superwash and I did the heels, cuffs, and toes in a cotton, because it's a superwash and cotton, I do put them like in the washer and dryer and there's no problem, besides like the pilling. Yeah, I really enjoyed making these. These are, well, almost every sock just kind of slides off my son's feet. So they do come off a lot whenever he wears them, but they're still kind of like, they're pretty big for him still. So I think he'll grow into them. Maybe even like next winter, he might still be able to wear them, which is nice. The next project I finished was another pair of socks. And this, so the toddler socks, the Rhyolite toddler socks, I finished in the middle of April. Then the next pair of socks I finished in September. So I took a 5-month knitting break. I had, I guess, some projects like on the go, but I didn't complete anything in those 5 months. I focused more on gardening in the spring, summer. So that's why there wasn't anything knit during that time. But the next pair of socks, I did the Hermione's Everyday Socks by Erica Luder. And this is a free sock pattern. I don't have these socks because they were a gift. And I really loved how these turned out, except for a couple of things. I had originally used this yarn, which is the Cascade Yarns Heritage Sock Yarn in the color 5742 Silver Gray. I'd originally started making a different sock. I think it was the Andrea Mowry DRK Everyday Socks. Is that her ribbed sock that's like all over ribbed, like on the bottom of the foot? I started making that sock for myself, is what I wanted it for. It was my first time doing a toe-up construction sock, and I knew that it would look like a little small because it was ribbing, so it cinches in, right? And while I was knitting, I was kind of like, yeah, I know, like it cinches in, and then when your foot's in it, it stretches out, and then it like shortens the length, so I have to knit it longer. And because with the Rhyolite socks, they were a bit big, I wanted to make this DRK Everyday sock in a smaller size. I chose way too small, and I'll show a picture of what my sock ended up looking like. Needless to say, it obviously did not fit. And what I ended up doing was ripping the yarn out and then using that yarn to make one of these Hermione's Everyday Socks. Now, I had blocked that DRK Everyday Sock. So that yarn was already like expanded. So when I knit with it again and then blocked it, it did not grow to the same size as the other sock that was knit with unblocked yarn, which is something that I didn't think about when I made these. So because of that, one of the socks is a little bit longer in the leg and the foot length than the other one, which is sad because this is such a pretty pattern, especially I think with this yarn. It turned out really, really pretty. And I liked the stitch definition and the feel of it. It was really nice, but the only thing is that, yeah, I think it's because the yarn I used for one sock had been blocked in that failed sock project. And so it didn't grow as much the second time that it was knit up. But yeah, I ended up giving these to my sister for her birthday, and I think she liked them. This brings us to my first self-drafted pair of socks. At this point, I was feeling pretty confident with my sock making abilities, and I had a specific sock in mind that I wanted to make for another gift. This one I used Old School Acres I think it was a 2-ply fingering weight yarn in the color undyed brown, and it was like a brown color. And I made this pair of socks for my cousin. I don't have them here because they were a gift. I did a 2x2 rib, and I wanted to make these not like short socks, but like not like totally up your calf. So they are kind of like a short to mid-length sock, I would say. I'm really happy with how these turned out. I think it looks really nice, and I was so proud that I just made it up. I used a lot of what I learned from the Rye Light socks, and I also referenced the video, the Crazy Sock Ladies Magic Loop sock knitting technique video. I referenced that for almost every pair of socks that I have made. Oh, I forgot to say that after my first pair of socks, the ones that I used DPNs for, the pair of socks I made after that, the Rye Light socks that I made for my mom, the blue ones, I used Magic Loop for that, and I haven't looked back. I really love that technique. I found maybe with the first 2 pairs, you could kind of see the lines where like the Magic Loop, the stitches between the 2 cords are. But as I've gone on, I've gotten a lot better at keeping them closer together, and I don't think you can tell anymore where those lines are. And yeah, I really like that technique. Magic Loop technique. The Crazy Sock Lady has a really good like full length video tutorial on how to do. She has like her own sock pattern, but you can adapt it to whatever sock pattern you're doing for the Magic Loop technique. She also has for like so many other sock making techniques, but I found that her Magic Loop technique video was very helpful for me learning how to do Magic Loop on socks. Okay, so back to these socks, my first self-drafted pair. This was also my first time trying 2 at a time socks, and I didn't like it. I didn't like that you were doing 2 at a time, but technically like you were dealing with 2 balls, and it wanted to like tangle up, and it was more to think about, I guess, than just kind of mindless like going back and forth on the Magic Loop with 1 ball of yarn. Even though it made the socks like pretty much exactly the same, except for the heel flap you do separate, so you could still have differences in that. Even though it made it pretty much exactly the same, I think I prefer just knitting 1 sock at one time. I also get the gratification of completing something faster with doing 1 at a time socks. So you knit a sock, you finish it, you're like, yeah, this is great. And then you do the next one. Whereas the 2 at a time socks took longer before you had a look at this finished thing. This is where my knitting really started to pick back up, was in the fall with those 2 pairs of socks that we just talked about. Next thing I finished was a pair of socks for my cousin's baby. I did the Perfect Newborn Socks by Tabitha Gandy, and I chose to do the cable design. So it was my first time doing cables in a really long time, like years and years and years. And because this was knit on such thin needles, I ended up using a toothpick for a cable, and that worked really well actually. I knit this in some more mystery yarn. It, I think was, oh, I don't have the name of it, but it was a cotton superwash wool and polyamide blend. I'm sure I would, if I had that information, why didn't I have the name of it? Not sure, but they turned out good. I don't think this was the best yarn to make socks out of. It wasn't super stretchy, and especially for like a newborn, you don't want to like bend and like contort their feet. You want it to just like open up and slip the sock on, and then it holds onto their foot. So I don't know if this was the best yarn to use, but I chose it because it was some of our grandmother's yarn, and I thought it would have that sentimental value to it that she would appreciate, my cousin would appreciate. They looked really cute in the end. I don't know if the baby ever wore them, but it's the thought that counts, I guess. We're taking a break from socks. And here is the next project I finished. It is the Mini Augustins #1 by Sophie Ann Velling. And this is actually what inspired me to start making knitting videos. I was so proud of this project and I just wanted to talk about it so much to anyone who would listen. And of course, people who are knitters appreciate a bit more the technique and the time and the detail that goes into making something like this. So yeah, that's what I have a memory of with this, is that after I made it, I was like, I think I want to start making knitting videos because I just really want to talk about this with someone. Yeah, this is a really fun pattern. I knit it in Isager Yarn Tavini in the colorway 19S, which is this pretty pink color. I think they called it rhubarb in the store that I got it from. It's so pretty. It starts in the middle, so it's circular and works its way out, and then you do an applied lace border all the way around. I'm really happy with how it turned out, and I use this all the time. I was worried that I would finish it and then it would be like too precious to use almost. I knit this for my daughter's first birthday. Yeah, I was worried that I would be like, I spent so much time, so much effort on this, like we have to keep it perfect. Or I'd be worried about like, I don't know, she's a baby, if she like chews on it and it like felts or something. I was worried about that. But what I use it for is a car seat blanket. And it is perfect for that. It's perfect to just sit on her lap in the car to keep like a little bit of an extra layer of warmth while she's in her car seat. So I'm really happy with how it turned out, and I'm happy that we actually use it. I started my Christmas socks after the blanket, and the Christmas socks were a set of matching socks that I self-drafted for myself, my husband, and our 2 kids. I do have them all here. These are my socks, which, yeah, they should be washed and depilled. And my husband's socks. And then my son's socks and my daughter's socks. These were really fun to knit. I did self-draft them. So I did a 3x1 rib and just like a regular heel flap and gusset with a wedge toe. I knit these all in Old School Acres sport weight, and I think it was 2-ply sport weight yarn in the color Undyed Black, which is a really pretty brown color. So I was really happy with how these turned out. The only problem is that I finished my son's socks. Oh, it says I finished them at the end of November. November 22nd is when I finished them. But in the time between me finishing them and then Christmas, December 25th, his feet grew and they didn't fit him properly at Christmas, which was really sad. But it's not a big deal. My daughter can always wear them when her feet grow a little bit more. I was able to like stretch them onto his foot, but as soon as he started walking around, the heel wanted to just slip off because it didn't want to be stretched that much. So no big deal. My daughter can wear them probably next year. Hers fit, but with any socks on kids, they want to slip off. So they go on and then a couple minutes later, they're off. In between all of those Christmas socks, I knit a pair of mittens for my son. I followed the World's Simplest Mittens by Tin Can Knits pattern in one of the smallest sizes for like a toddler. And I used 2 yarns held together, the Briggs & Little Tuffy 2-ply in the color 92 Blue Mix, as well as Old School Acres Undyed White Sport Weight yarn, which is this nice white color. I said before, I wasn't super happy with how the marling turned out. It looks more splotchy than marled to me, but it's so cute because my son really does love these mittens, and he has some like thicker, more like proper winter mittens that he wears when we go outside now because it is getting like quite frigid. And every time he's like, no, I want to wear my blue mittens. So I think it's cute that he like actually likes them and actually wants to wear them. I did really like knitting this pattern. The only thing that I had issues with was I ended up with a hole at the base of the thumb, like where I join it to the hand. I ended up with a hole on one, but not the other. So I'm not sure what I did wrong on the one. I'm going to have to try, I think I'll try a few different knitting patterns for mittens and see if there's something in other patterns about how to eliminate that hole. You know what, I probably should just like look up some videos or something about it because I'm sure they're out there. Now we're getting into things that I finished more recently. First one is the Laulu shawl from Sari Nordland, which I absolutely love. It's just like a perfect little, it's just small. I wear it sometimes like over my head if we're going outside and it's not like super cold. I knit this in with 2 yarns held together, the Rowan Kid Silk Haze in the color 631 Jacob, as well as Old School Acres Fingering Undyed Brown. And I love how the cables look. This was a challenging knit for me. When I think about the time I spent knitting it, all I remember is having my iPad open with the chart in front of me and like crossing off every single row as I went. And I never got to the point where I could predict or memorize the pattern. I always had to look at the chart the whole time. Increases to decreases, everything I had to look at the chart for. I was also playing Yarn Chicken because I only had 1 ball of the Rowan Kid Silk Haze, and it was in a color that is discontinued. So I was worried that I would run out, and thankfully I didn't, and it turned out really, really nice. I love the like kind of squiggles and little wavy patterns that this shawl has. I think the details are so pretty, and they kind of like, they're each in their own line. Like you can see that there's like sections to the shawl, right? But it feels like they almost interweave and go together in and out, which I think is so pretty. My first sweater project that I've completed, the Wednesday sweater from Petite Knit. You've heard it before that I had an issue with the dye of the yarn, even though it was all from the same dye lot. I have for sure 2 different colors, more like 3 different colors. This is like a medium gray, a light gray, and then a dark gray going on in this sweater, which was not my intention. So I am not happy with my yarn choice for this. Not only the color that I chose, but also just like the type of yarn I chose. It's such a heavy yarn. I ended up using the Briggs & Little Atlantic 3-ply yarn in the color 12 medium gray. And yeah, this yarn is advertised as more like a outerwear yarn. So it is very thick, very heavy. If I were to knit this again, I would not use this yarn. I would use definitely something that's like lighter weight. This took me a long time to finish it. I started it April 1st, 2023, and I finished it on December 10th, 2023. So it took me a good part of the year. For most of the year, it just sat. Once I saw this color change, I just left it. I didn't want to work on it because I wasn't excited to finish it. Then, then I got the motivation to just like get it done. Got it done, off my needles, out of my project basket. And I'm glad to have had the experience of knitting a drop shoulder sweater. I will definitely knit one again in the future. I really liked knitting it. It was a nice construction. First time doing half and fully twisted rib. on the neck was the full twisted rib, and then half twisted rib on the hem and sleeves. First time doing an Italian bind off. So I had a lot of good like technique learning experiences with this sweater. Right now I'm thinking I might harvest the yarn to make felted slippers. That's what I think this yarn might be good for. I don't think I can bring myself to unravel it like just yet because it is still so fresh that I finished it compared to like the amount of time that I had it just sitting on my needles. So I don't think I can bring myself to start ripping stitches out just yet. But that's the idea I had in my mind, to repurpose this yarn to make felted slippers. In December, I made a little mohair bow just with like some mohair scraps that I had. I just have it as like a long ribbon almost right now, but I'll put in some pictures of what it looks like as a bow. I really am happy with how it turned out. I wanted to use some mohair bits that I had, and this worked perfectly for it because I don't know what else you could make with such a small amount of mohair. I used the pattern, well, very loosely followed the pattern, the Mohair Bows by Millie Murphy. Very loosely because I didn't have enough mohair to actually like complete her pattern. I only did 1 or 2 of the increases, and then as long as my yarn would allow for. And yeah, I'm happy with how it turned out. I would definitely recommend this pattern for if you're looking for like a really fluffy, lightweight bow pattern. And the last thing I finished in 2023 was this self-drafted balaclava that I was definitely inspired by the balaclava #1 by My Favorite Things. I knit this in Patons North America Classic Wool worsted weight in the color 77710 Cherry. And yeah, you can, if you're interested to know more about the construction, you can go watch my last video about it. But I did very loosely follow a free balaclava pattern to just like understand more about where do you start, where do you go with a balaclava construction. And then from the information I got from that, I just put in what I thought would look nice for what I wanted. And yeah, I'm happy with it. I might still take out the ribbing around like the face because I think I didn't pick up enough stitches and it's a little bit tight. But again, I just can't, it's too fresh in my mind for it being like done, like this project is done, for me to think about, okay, now I'm gonna undo. It's not a ton of work, really. It didn't take me that long to do this last bit of ribbing. We'll see if this actually ever happens. I want it to, but I think I need someone to like force me to. That is everything that I knit in 2023. I'm really happy with how my knitting journey went in 2023. I learned so much, so many things I tried for the first time, and I'm really proud of myself for trying things that were scary. Like I did a whole lace blanket and I made socks, which seemed really scary. Like, how do you knit something that like has a turn in it? Like, how do you do that? My husband will often see me working on a project and say something along the lines of, I don't understand how you can take this like string of yarn and wrap it around some needles and make whatever it is that I'm making. And isn't that just so cool that we're able to do that? Like, it's so cool that you can just take yarn and some needles and then all of a sudden you have a blanket or mittens or socks or a sweater. Like, I think it's just so cool. And it helped me a lot this year with like, I said it was my coping mechanism this year for just like de-stressing, getting through the day, It was something to look forward to. The reason I actually got back into knitting was because I needed a hobby that I could do with kids around. Previous to knitting, my main hobby, or like my favorite thing to do, was nature photography and hiking and just like being out in a forest or being by the ocean or something. That was where I found a lot of relaxation and felt really creative, and just like felt really joyful. And with the stage of life I'm in, that is just not something I can do all the time. I know it won't be forever. So instead of wishing like, oh, I wish I could, go out this afternoon, or even like, I wish I could go out for the day or something on a hike and take pictures or like look for this animal or something, instead of just like wishing for that and I guess resenting the fact that I can't, or it's not easy. I know if I really wanted to, I probably could figure something out, but it wouldn't be in the way that I truly want to experience my hobby. So yeah, that's why I started knitting, because I needed something that I could do, I guess, like in the margins of my life, that I could easily pick up and put down. I could work on with kids around while they're napping. When they're napping, you don't know if you have like an hour left or if you have 5 minutes left. So I needed something that I could start and stop pretty easily. And knitting was really perfect for that. It brought me a lot of joy, a lot of, like feelings of creativity. I love that I can take words on a page and turn it into something, or even like use my own brain to make a pair of socks. Like, what? That's crazy. I'm really excited about all the things I'm going to learn, all the projects I'm going to make in 2024. I've already started some things that I'm just like, this is so cool. I can't believe that I'm able to make this, taking it a step further than what I've already learned in 2023. And I'd love to have you along for my knitting journey this year. See you next time. Bye-bye.